The Whispers of Veridian House. Part 1. The Heiress of Shadows. Chapter 1. The Last Train to Veridian. The train chugged through a landscape slowly being swallowed by mist and creeping ivy. Elara Gray pressed her forehead to the cool glass, watching the world turn monochrome. She was a woman of science, of soil samples and precise sketches, yet the weight of the unfinished letter in her carpetbag felt like a superstitious charm. Veridian House emerged from the fog not as a structure, but as a geological feature, a jagged outcrop of stone and sorrow. Its towers were broken teeth against a bruised sky. As the hired cart rattled up the weed-choked drive, a figure detached itself from the shadows of the front porch. He was tall, dressed in practical, dark work clothes, but he carried none of a servant's deference. His hair was the color of wet slate, his eyes a startling, clear green that seemed to dissect her from 50 paces. "Miss Gray," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the damp air. "I am Cashin, the groundskeeper. Mr. Valerius is detained. He asked me to see you settled." "Mr. Valerius?" "My solicitor said the estate was unoccupied." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The master of Veridian is never far. Come, the weather worsens." He led her into a cavernous hall, where a portrait of a severe man with piercing eyes and black hair dominated the space. "Alastair Valerius," Cashin said, following her gaze. "Your great-great-uncle, the last true master. And you work for his ghost?" Elara asked, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. "I work for the house," he corrected, his green eyes locking onto hers. "It has needs, as do its guests. Your room is prepared. I would advise against wandering after dark. The cliffs are treacherous, and the house has its own currents." That night, as wind screamed through unseen crevices, Elara was certain she heard the soft, rhythmic sound of a woman weeping. When she lit her candle and peered into the dark hall, she found only a single, fresh black raven's feather on the threadbare runner. Chapter 2. A Portrait in the Attic. Days bled into one another, marked by Cashin's silent appearances with firewood or a tray of simple food. He was a repository of grim knowledge, pointing out unstable floorboards, explaining which drafts were wind and which were the house settling around its old bones. His proximity was a constant, unsettling charge. He spoke like an academic. His hands were calloused from labor, and his gaze held a proprietary intensity that made her skin prickle. Driven by the mystery of Seraphina's letter, Elara explored. In a dusty attic under a shroud, she found not a ghost, but a painting. It was Seraphina. The resemblance to her own face in the mirror was uncanny. The same chestnut hair, the same stubborn set to the mouth. But Seraphina's eyes in the portrait held a desperate light, a silent scream rendered in oil paint. Clutched in her painted hand was a sprig of a strange, bell-shaped white flower. Later, in the overgrown walled garden, Cashin found her sketching the flower from memory. He went very still. "Where did you see that?" His voice was taut. "In a portrait." "What is it?" "Aconitum napellus," he said, the Latin rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Monkshood." "Wolfsbane." Every part of it is lethally poisonous. He took a step closer, the scent of damp earth and something sharp, like ozone, clinging to him. It was Alistair Valerius's specialty. He was a botanist, like you, though his interests were more toxic. Did he poison her? The question hung in the air between them. Cashin's expression closed. The official verdict was an accident. The cliffs are hungry, but this house devours stories, Miss Grey. I would not dig too deeply for one's best left buried. Chapter 3. The Gardener's Warning. Her digging led her to the village pub. Old Silas, who'd once done odd jobs at Veridian, grew talkative after a third pint. Cashin, he wheezed. A strange one. Showed up out of the blue after the last Valeries died. Knows more about that cursed garden than any man ought. Some say he's not a groundskeeper at all. Some say he's a scholar, writing some great work. Others, he leaned in, beer breath sour. Others whisper he is Valerius, that the family line has a way of clinging on, that the first wife, the one who went mad, she cursed them all to walk the grounds until their sins were answered. Alara laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's superstition. Is it? Silas fixed her with milky eyes. Why do you think he stays? No one stays at Veridian for the wages. He's waiting for something. Or someone. You mind your step, miss? That house has a taste for gray women. That night, a storm broke over the cliffs. A crash from the conservatory, a room Cashin had told her was unsafe, sent Alara running. She found him there, kneeling amidst shattered glass and uprooted orchids, his hand bleeding freely. What are you doing in here? He snarled, his usual composure shattered. I heard a crash. You're hurt. It's nothing. He tried to pull away, but she caught his wrist. In the flickering lantern light, she saw it, a deep, old scar across his palm, identical to one she'd seen in a sketch of Alistair Valerius's hand in a journal she'd found in the library. Their eyes met. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through her. Silas's words echoed. Some whisper he is Valerius. Who are you? She whispered. He pulled his hand back, his face a mask of stormy conflict. The man who is trying to keep you from shattering on these rocks, he said, his voice raw. Leave this alone, Alara. For your own sake. He called her by her name. Not Miss Grey. It felt like a key turning in a lock. Part 2. The Master of Ravenswood. Chapter 4. A Bargain in the Rain. Confrontation was inevitable. She cornered him in the library, the unfinished letter in her hand. You knew her. Seraphina. You know what happened. Cashin Alistair, whoever he was, stood by the fire, its light carving shadows into his face. He looked ancient and weary. Yes. Are you Alistair Valerius? A ghost? A madman? A bleak smile. All three, perhaps. My name is Cashin Valerius. Alistair was my grandfather. The obsession, the brilliance, the cruelty, it runs in the blood like a toxin. He turned to face her fully. I came here to end it. To dismantle his legacy, plant by poisonous plant, journal by dreadful journal. And then you arrived. The last living branch of the Grey family tree, walking into the wolf's den with the botanist's curiosity and your gray tant's eyes. So you've been watching me, studying me, as he studied her. To protect you from what still lurks here, he snapped, his control slipping. You think the danger is only in the past? His work, his ideas, they have a way of seeping into the stones, of tempting those who come after. He proposed a bargain. You want the truth of Seraphina? I will give it to you. Every journal, every specimen log. In return, you help me. The walled garden, his poison garden, is overgrown, a hazard. Help me catalog and safely destroy it. A botanist's final act for a botanist's greatest crime. When it is done, Veridian House is yours, free and clear, and I will be gone. It was madness. But the truth was a hook in her heart. And if I say no? His green eyes held hers, a terrifying honesty in them. Then I fear you will meet the same fate as the others. Not by my hand, but by the ghost of his obsession. I am the only one who understands it. Against every instinct, she accepted. Chapter 5. Lessons in Botany and Fear. Their work began. Days were spent in the eerie tranquility of the walled garden, a place of macabre beauty. Cashin was a brilliant, demanding teacher. He showed her Tropa belladonna, deadly nightshade, Conium maculatum, hemlock, and the infamous aconitum. As they worked, he spoke of his grandfather, not as a monster, but as a tragically brilliant man whose curiosity corroded his morality. He believed fear was the root of all human passion, Cashin said one afternoon, his gloves stained with dark soil. Love, worship, obedience. He sought to distill it, to understand it throughout induced experiences. You mean he terrified the women in his life as an experiment? Elara stated flatly. Cashin flinched. Yes, and my father continued his notes. And I, in my youth, before I understood the cost, tried to decipher them. The curse is not supernatural, Elara. It is the curse of a terrible idea, passed down like a genetic trait. The proximity was a different kind of toxin. She learned the lines of concentration on his brow, the quiet intensity of his focus. He, in turn, began to seek her opinions, to genuinely listen. The air between them grew thick with unspoken words and electric touches when handing over tools. One evening, finding her sketching in the library, he said, "You draw her with too much sorrow." Seraphina was a fighter. Her madness was not a surrender, it was a weapon. She was trying to expose him to the very end. He placed a brittle, sealed journal on the table. His private log. I have never had the courage to open it. Perhaps we both need to. Chapter 6. The Locked West Wing. The journal was a descent into a meticulously documented madness. Alistair's entries detailed his methods, calculated absences, unsettling gifts, gaslighting, the strategic use of the house's eerie sounds. His goal, to map the threshold of the human psyche. Seraphina's final entry, in her own frantic hand, was scrawled in the margin. He plans the final trial. The cliff path at midnight. I must be ready first. The last page held a diagram of the house's west wing, marked specimen preparation and observation. It's locked, Elara said. The key? Cashin's face was pale. Destroyed, I thought. He led her to a grandfather clock in the hall. Reaching behind the pendulum, his fingers found a hidden latch. A small compartment slid open. Inside lay a heavy iron key. The door to the West Wing groaned open on stiff hinges. The room within was not a dusty relic. It was clean, organized, and chillingly modern. A large desk held fresh paper, expensive pens, and a series of detailed, recent journals. Not Alistair's. Not Cashin's. On the wall were photographs. Serafina. Eliza. Other women she didn't recognize. And in the center, a recent, candid shot of Alara herself, taken in the poison garden days earlier, her head bent over a specimen. Cashin's shocked gasp was genuine. "This is not mine." A smooth voice spoke from the doorway. "Of course it isn't, brother. It's mine." A man stepped into the light. He shared Cashin's height and bone structure, but where Cashin was storm and stone, this man was polished ice. Dr. Julian Valerius, the celebrated academic and psychologist, presumed to be lecturing abroad. "Julian." Cashin's voice was a threat. "I continued grandfather's work where you lost your nerve," Cashin, Julian said, his smile serene. "The thesis needed a modern methodology. And when dear Alara arrived, the perfect, skeptical subject, so like poor Serafina, it was an opportunity one couldn't resist." The weeping sounds? A very high-quality speaker. The feathers? My trained raven, Poe. Cashin's grim warnings? All perfectly designed to create a baseline of unease, which I have been observing and documenting. He turned his chillingly pleasant gaze on Alara. "You have performed wonderfully. Your growing trust in Cashin, your defiance, your fear, it's all exquisite data. And soon, we'll proceed to the final phase. The cliff path at midnight. A family tradition." Cashin moved in front of Alara. "It ends now, Julian." "Does it?" Julian raised a hand, and from the shadows behind him emerged a hulking man, the real groundskeeper, whom Julian had replaced. "Take my brother to the old ice cellar. Let him cool his newfound heroism. The lady and I have a session to prepare for." Part 3. Secrets in the Garden. Chapter 7. The Poison Garden. Alara was taken not to a cell, but back to the poison garden. Julian, the charming monster, walked her through it as if giving a tour. "Fear is the root, Alara," he explained. "But it must be refined. Alistair used blunt terror. I use psychological precision. The uncertainty. Is Cashin a protector or the villain? Is the house haunted or are you being manipulated? This cognitive dissonance is far more potent." He stopped before a beautiful, flowering vine. Gelsemium sempervirens. Carolina jessamine. In small, controlled doses, it induces paralysis, a feeling of being trapped in one's own body, fully aware but unable to move. A metaphor, don't you think? For the societal traps that bind women, the legacies they cannot escape. He planned to dose her with it before taking her to the cliffs. Chapter 8. The Previous Mrs. Valerius. Locked in a bedroom, Alara fought panic. Her mind raced over every plant, every conversation with Cashin. Gelsemium. The antidote was not a specific chemical, but supportive care, keeping the victim awake and breathing until it passed. And Cashin had mentioned the root of Glycyrrhiza glabra, licorice, could stimulate alertness in some alkaloid poisonings. She had licorice root in her own botanical kit, still in her carpet bag in the hall. If she could get to it. The window was barred. The door was solid oak. Despair began to rise when she heard a faint, rhythmic scraping at the lock. It clicked open. A gaunt, elderly woman stood there, dressed in faded but clean clothes. It was Margaret, the housekeeper Julian had said was on leave. "Quickly, child," she whispered, her eyes starting nervously. "I was his first wife, not Serafina before. He drove me to the edge of the cliffs too, but I jumped into the sea instead of onto the rocks. Washed up half dead, hidden by fishermen. I've been hiding in the servant passages ever since, watching, waiting for a chance to stop him. Cashin is a good man, trapped by his name. You must help him." Margaret gave her the key and a rusty trowel. "The ice cellar is through the kitchen garden. Hurry." Chapter 9. A Choice and a Key. Freeing Cashin was a frantic struggle with the old cellar lock. When the door swung open, he burst out, his face etched with fear for her. "Julian has a gun," he said, gripping her arms. "He's gone mad with his work. You need to run. Take Margaret, get to the village." Alara shook her head, pressing the licorice root into his hand. "He plans to use gelsemium on me. This might help counteract it. I'm not running. This ends tonight with both of us. Or it never ends." She saw the conflict in his eyes, the valerious instinct to control, to protect by isolation, warring with the man who had learned to respect her strength. He made his choice. He took the route. Then we face him together. Not with his weapons of fear, but with ours. Truth and Light. Part 4. Truth in the Dark. Chapter 10. Confession by Candlelight. They confronted Julian in Alastair's old study. He held a pistol, casual as a pen. Cashin stepped forward, placing himself between Julian and Alara. "It's over, Julian. Your data is corrupted. You didn't account for her courage. Or for mine." "Sentiment," Julian sneered. "The ultimate confounding variable. Stand aside." "No," Cashin's voice was absolute. "You will have to kill me first." "And then what?" "Your thesis on fear ends with a mundane murder." "Where's the artistry in that, brother?" While they spoke, Alara slowly, carefully, emptied a vial from her pocket, a concentrated, non-lethal irritant powder made from crushed capsicum seeds, meant for deterring pests. She blew it into Julian's face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes. The gun went off, blowing a chunk of plaster from the ceiling. Cashin was on him in an instant, wrestling the weapon away and pinning him down. Chapter 11. The Real Ghost of Veridian. With Julian restrained, the real work began. Over the next week, with the police involved and Julian taken to a secure facility, Cashin and Alara, with Margaret's help, systematically dismantled the legacy of Veridian. They burned Alastair's and Julian's journals in a great pyre in the garden. They uprooted the most dangerous plants in the poison garden, preserving only a few for legitimate scientific study under lock and key. They opened every room, every passage to the cleansing sunlight. The ghost of Veridian had never been Seraphina. It had been the lingering poison of a terrible idea, given new life by Julian. By exposing it, they finally laid it to rest. Chapter 12. From Ashes, a Beginning. On the day Julian was formally committed, Cashin found Alara on the cliffs, not at midnight, but at dawn. The sea below was calm, reflecting the new sun. "The house is yours," he said quietly. "The legal work is done. I will leave today." "Why?" she asked, not looking at him. "Because I am a Valerius. The taint is there. You deserve light and peace." She turned to him then. "You are Cashin, the man who chose to end the curse. The man who stood between me and a bullet. The man who trusts me with a trowel and a truth." She took his scarred hand. "The house isn't mine. It's ours. And its next chapter shouldn't be about destruction, but about cultivation. A proper garden. A safe place." He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, fierce in the morning light. For the first time, the storm in his green eyes cleared, leaving only a vulnerable, wondering hope. He didn't speak. He simply brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a silent pledge. Epilogue. 1 year later. The article in Botanical Quarterly was titled, "From Poison to Pollination: The Rehabilitation of the Veridian Gardens." The co-authors were Alara Gray and Cashin Valerius. The accompanying photo showed them not in a lab, but in the thriving, sun-drenched walled garden, now bursting with medicinal herbs, pollinator-friendly flowers, and safe, rare specimens. They were looking at each other, not at the camera, their expressions a quiet testament to a hard-won peace. In the village, they no longer told ghost stories about Veridian House. They spoke of the reclusive botanist and her husband, the historian, who had healed a broken place and, in doing so, healed each other. The whispers in the halls were finally just the wind, and the only thing walking the cliffs at midnight was the moon, keeping watch over a house that had finally learned how to be a home.